The first time I heard of a trauma bond was when I was in the middle of the relationship. I actually started to see a coach. I'd gotten into this relationship. I was a few months into it, and I found out he was cheating on the honeymoon. So I come home from the honeymoon and I immediately started looking for help. And I found a group that was specifically for partners of sex addicts. So I joined it as a small group of women. And the coach said to me, a lot of you don't have relationships that are based on love. You have relationships that are based on fear. And that was the first I'd ever heard of anything related to something like this before, that relationships can have roots of different reasons, not just mutual compatibility or mutual interest, that actually could be based on fear. And that was the first that anybody had suggested to me that there was something that potentially was toxic about the connection I'd had with this person. I had recognized earlier when I was a child, a connection I had with my mom was really a lot of fear-based in it, that I remember feeling like really worried that if I wasn't around her or something bad was going to happen to her. But I'd never heard of trauma bond. It's not something we discussed, believe it or not, despite the fact that I'm a clinical psychologist. It wasn't covered in graduate school. So when I got out of that toxic relationship, I really wanted to understand what happened, because it just felt mystifying. How could I, adult, because this is an assumption that we make. We make the assumption that adults go into a relationship with complete autonomy, complete full control, free will. And how could I, as an adult, basically get into a relationship which I gave my control away to another person, where I became coercively controlled by another adult? In fact, I just had a fascinating discussion with Daniela Messinak. Daniela Messinak, she's known as the knitting cult lady on TikTok. So if you want to, that's where she hangs out most of the time. So if you ever want to find her content, she also wrote the book Uncultured. It's her memoir of what happened to her. She grew up in a cult her whole life, one of the worst, actually. It was a very, very tragic story of hers that she experienced. And her and I had an interview today for our upcoming podcast of Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. She's going to be on December 2nd on that episode, talking about how narcissistically abusive relationships are essentially a cult of two. And one of the things she talked about in the first stage of a cult, when they're trying to cast a spell on you, mesmerize you, is that they create this, they break your identity down. And one of the ways that this restructuring of your identity happens is that you have this simultaneous experience of, I've never had anything this amazing, over the top, wonderful. I've never felt so connected, so understood, while at the same time there's this persistent fear of loss. Like if anything that you do, this is going to disappear on you. Mine introduced it, and she even said this something fascinating in this interview. She said they usually use appearance, whether your hair is short or long, or what you're wearing, or something about you and your appearance is a way to sort of control you. And for those of you who follow me, who know anything about my channel, you know that I've had a massive hair loss after my third baby, and that I wear wigs. So that's why you see me in different color wigs all the time, is because I'm shifting between the wigs. So I go from, dirty blonde to brunette to redhead, depending on the mood I'm in. And what he did, at the time this happened, I hadn't hardly acclimated to the wig life, which was a real massive adjustment. Because I'll tell you, as a woman, losing your hair is crushing. It's crushing. So I felt tremendous amount of shame. And I suspect he knew that. And he challenged me right off the bat that if I wasn't able to go and meet him for an overnight without my wig, then the relationship was over. This was a classic move, that they make some comment about what you're wearing or how you look or your appearance or how you wear your hair or something like that. But I thought, you know what, I'm a grown up. I want intimacy. I want genuineness. And so why would I not show up this way and be vulnerable this way, thinking that this was just part of my, taking a risk, being transparent. I didn't realize that this was a test, that he was testing me for my compliance. And this was actually a way to see whether or not that I was maneuverable, that I was going to be open to suggestion. So that love bombing stage really sets the groundwork. And part of the groundwork not only is to increase your trust prematurely, reduce your inhibitions. That's the word I meant to say. Reduce your inhibitions and your reservations. They also are trying to then insert control in a new way and see what degree are you compliant and manipulatable. But they also want to see to the degree that you that they can insulate you or isolate you so that they have more control over you, and more that whatever they say is really powerful because you're not getting the whole world's input or the people you trust's input. You're only hearing this particular person's input. So if you haven't already noticed, today we're talking about trauma bonds, everything related to trauma bonds. What are they? Why do we get into them? How does it happen to a human being? How does it happen to an adult who's smart, educated, maybe experienced in the world, maybe have had other relationships? How do you get into these really toxic relationships in which you find out when it's over, it's like, what happened to me? I became somebody I didn't recognize. I remember at the end, and I was just talking to Ro, in fact, it's this week. So if you guys want to tune in and listen to a Roller Coaster of Love, Rosanna Faye and I discuss the late stage of a trauma bond, which is because we're going to talk about all the stages today. So it's not just, but I'm starting at the beginning and I'm jumping at the end. But the late stage of the trauma bond, there's such submission and such subservience that happens that you start to feel like you've disappeared. And that maybe if you finish disappearing, you start to feel like you being here doesn't matter anymore. Maybe it would be better if you just disappeared. You start to feel like your life ceases to have a lot of meaning or purpose. So I want to get into all of that today about why that happens, what are the stages, how can you recognize that it's happening to you, and then what to do about it if you're experiencing one right now. And for you guys who are new to my platform, I always go live on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I love to educate about this stuff. I take your questions near the last 20 minutes or so, but primarily we just come in here and I introduce a topic and really talk a lot about it. And by the way, I'm a clinical psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. And these days I primarily promote and educate on abuse, and particularly narcissistic abuse related topics. So I'm thrilled that you're here. Strap in. We're going to talk everything related to trauma bonds today. So I think the best way to think of a trauma bond, and by the way, if you're ever interested, whoever came up with this idea of trauma bonds, it's Patrick Carnes. He wrote the book called The Betrayal Bond. That was the first title he called it, Betrayal Bonds, not Trauma Bonds. And the rest of the title of the book he kind of introduced this was called Betrayal Bonds Free of Exploitive Relationships. So yeah, it's a great book. It's one of the first books I read when I first got out of toxic relationships, just as I'm trying to write my book, because I wrote my book, honestly, if you guys picked up Love You More, I wrote it for me, really. I wrote it because I got out of that relationship and I thought, what did I just survive? I felt so crazy. The gaslighting was so severe that I wasn't for sure what was real and what wasn't real. And I had to just recount it. The duplicity was so over the top. The fact that this person was living a double life. For those of you who are familiar, who've been on with me, you probably heard me say that near the end of the relationship, I actually said to him, you know what, I think we go through a day and that this is what you're doing. You do this and you go here and you do that and you go there and then you come home and we have dinner. I thought, this is what a day looks like. I said, how close to the truth is that? And he looked at me and he said, not at all. Not at all. So this guy, for 2 years, lived a second life while keeping me under the thumb with such intensive course of control that when we were together, I wasn't able to eat until he was ready to eat. We ate what he wanted to eat. The sleep was on his schedule. He kept me up most of the night. Most nights we ran all day. I mean, it was crazy. And I had no idea. Honestly, I had no idea in the middle of all of that I was being abused, that this was narcissistic abuse. I didn't realize I had a trauma bond. I just thought I had a bad relationship, that this was a really terrible situation in which I had married somebody who was a serial cheater, who claimed he had a sex addiction. I had no idea that this was all that. I mean, I knew he was a narcissist. It can't be a clinical psychologist, by the way. Sorry for that sound. I'm getting over a cold. I can't be a clinical psychologist and not recognize narcissistic personality disorder, but honestly, in school, they don't talk about narcissistic personality disorder in the consequent or in the context of what happens in a relationship. They talk about what they're like as a person, their personality traits. I didn't realize, and here's one of the unique things about this personality disorder. It's one of the few mental health conditions, disorders, the whole realm of the mental health disorders that the person who has it doesn't suffer, except everyone around them suffers. They make you suffer. So they think they're okay. They don't have a problem with themselves. They have a problem with you having a problem with them. But they think they're just fine. In fact, they think they're actually extra special, that they're sort of like, ultra human, superhuman. And then the rest of us are just sort of the, we're all the pawns out there. We just sort of, we're the ordinary things. They're the ones who are super special. But yeah, I'm looking at some of the comments coming in, and yeah, Teresa, they control your space, they control your time, they control your sleep, they control your diet, they control, how thin you are, they keep you running ragged and really exhausted, and all of that, and that happens right away in the love bombing stage. You don't recognize it because you're so like in love that you don't recognize, wow, I'm not sleeping a whole lot. I feel really caught up by this person. I'm becoming excessively preoccupied with this person. You don't realize that that's an essential part of the identity breakdown that captivates you in the spell, so that then you end up giving up big parts and pieces of yourself so that this person becomes the primary person in the relationship. You have no idea that that's happening. So let's go through the stages of a trauma bond. And then I also want to talk about how it gets formed. I mentioned a little bit of it about the coercive control, the isolation, the subtle criticism that comes all in, of course, is positive criticism, like, you know what, you'd look so much better if you kept your hair long, or, you'd look so much better if you shaved that beard off for the men, or whatever it is. So it comes in initially in those positive forms, but essentially it's still criticism. So the 7 stages are, as I've been talking about, is love bombing, and we've been spending some time on that. And in this stage, it kind of moves into the next stage, because the next stage is trust and dependency. So they begin to kind of foster themselves as being trustworthy, and you start to want to rely on them. They offer to financially help you or to really show up. They often will rescue you. They usually pick somebody who's in a vulnerable stage of life. Not that you're normally always vulnerable, but usually there's some stage of life, like for me, I had just lost my husband. I'd been widowed. But maybe for you, it might be you just, moved to a new job, or maybe there's been some kind of, you just bought a new house, or you're in a new part of the country you've never been before, or maybe you're a new mom or a new dad and you've never done that before, or you just got out of a relationship that really devastated you, that's so impactful, that's affected you deeply. But usually they look for somebody in a vulnerable position. I heard something that made me feel really uncomfortable, that narcissists, I don't know how true this is, so just take this as a grain of salt. This may not be research based, but somebody asked a narcissist, I think it was Aisha, Miss Aisha's account. She said that she was working with predators, and she asked them, how do you know when a victim is a victim? What do you see on a profile, a dating profile, that says to you, this person might be a good victim? And this person or people commented back, it's the vulnerability in the eyes. And I would love to, wouldn't you like to follow that up and put a series of pictures of you and say, okay, which of these pictures doesn't show vulnerability in the eyes? Because I'd like to know, what is it, and what are you seeing? Because I don't look at people and look at a photo and think, oh, there's a vulnerable person. I see it in the eyes. I don't tend to do that. But here's the ironic part. So as I'm going through the love bombing, I was in therapy at the time. And I remember saying to my therapist, I had never met someone safer. I actually said that. I had never, and I couldn't have said the more opposite truth. I had actually never met somebody more dangerous to me. So yeah, that's the second stage of love bombing. The second stage is trust and dependency. Here's another way he made me dependent on him. And I think he does this in all his relationships. I would be curious. Has this ever happened to any of you? You guys let me know if this has happened to you. Because my car at the time was low and I was starting to have joint problems, hip problems, And so he said, hey, my car is set higher than yours. Why don't we swap cars? I'll drive your car and you'll drive mine. I personally don't care. His car was okay. It wasn't anything special. My car was nicer, but I didn't want to look like I was all into my car's features. And so I said, sure, no problem with that. But see how that created dependency? Now I'm in his car and he's in my car and he has my car. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm looking back and I'm thinking that's really, in fact, I know he did it again because after he left me, one of the things he got from the assets of the estate was our company car, our vehicle. And he wanted me to sell it to his current girlfriend so that she'd have the invoice for it. So sure enough, he'd already swapped vehicles with her. I'm sure he was driving hers and she was driving his. And so he wanted me to send the title to her. So I'm curious, has that happened? Any of you had your partner, your narcissistic partner, swap vehicles with you and you drove theirs and they drove yours? If you guys have had that happen, if you can, put a blue heart up in the chat. I would love to see if I was the only one that happened to. Okay, so the next stage that happens is criticism and devaluation. So now they know that you're dependent and that you're trusting them. They start out by subtly insulting you, maybe blaming you. Maybe they're going to do things to make you feel a little insecure. You might feel like you get compared to their ex. Maybe they might, again, mention that your hair would look better if you let it grow or if you change the color. They might say, oh, here's another one that Daniela Mesenek told me that they do, is they tell you something that you can't do or wear. And this is what mine did. Mine said he preferred that I never wear animal print fabric, that those leopard fabric or tiger fabrics. He told me he really had a thing about it and he preferred that I never wear it. And you know what? One of the first outfits I bought after I got out of that relationship, because I never usually wore that. That wasn't my thing anyway. I wasn't one of those women that tended to wear, no shade on anyone who does, but it just wasn't my thing. But you know what? I now own a couple. I do wear them these days. I do wear animal camouflage clothing these days because I'm not, whatever. And it's sort of my way to, thumb him for that. But they'll do something kind of introduces criticism and but at first it says, it's done oh, I don't know, maybe this would go better if you did it this way. I'm just thinking of it right now off the top of my head. I had a date tell me that how women should have hygiene, you know what I'm talking about? Hygiene wash. And that all you women in the audience, you might not know that coconut oil is really a good hygiene wash. I'm thinking, this guy's been single his whole life. What does he know about hygiene wash for women? Anyway, they'll do really ridiculous stuff like that with you. So, but they'll start to introduce these criticism and devaluation as a way to start to make you feel not quite you, like you're not quite good enough. And you got to really work hard for their attention and favor. Then the next stage that starts happening is the fourth stage is gaslighting. So gaslighting is when they start to make you doubt your own perceptions, your sense of reality, even the correctness of you having feelings. So a good way I know what gaslighting is, if you're kind of struggling around gaslighting, what is it? It's whenever you present a problem or you bring something up, instead of them addressing the problem, they make you the issue. Like, for example, you'd say, hey, I'm going to use the typical one I usually use. Hey, did you take the garbage out? And they would say, why do you always have to start in on me like that? You just never let anything go. You have to nag me. See how the issue now no longer is, did you take the trash out? That's the issue. The issue now is that person's personality or memory or reality or feelings about something. You can hear things like, that's not how it happened, or I don't recall that, or you're remembering it incorrectly, or you sound so crazy when you say that, or why do you have to be so sensitive about everything, or I can't talk to you at all. I find you difficult to talk to. Anything that kind of attacks you for bringing some kind of issue up. One of the examples that happened to me was his mom happened to be staying at our house for lots of complicated reasons for a long period of time. She had some friends in town that she wanted to meet up. So he said, why don't we drop her off at the hotel where her friends are staying, and then you and I go get breakfast? And I'm thinking, oh, that sounds like a really good plan. I like that. So that day we drive to the hotel, and she's getting out. He's helping her out, and he looks at me and he says, why are you not getting out? Well, last I knew, we were going to go have breakfast together. He goes, no, we're joining them. Uh, and I'm thinking, no, that's not what you said. That's news to me. But I knew if I said, well, that's not what you said, he was like, I never said that. So it's some form that makes you start to doubt yourself, doubt your reality. So that's stage 4. Stage 5, it starts, and this is kind of late game now. You've been in this for a while. Stage 5 of a trauma bond is resignation and submission. So but if you get long enough into it, you start to feel like, I can't do anything right. I'm not allowed any freedoms. Everything that I do, if I think out of the box or think for myself or don't get their permission first, then it just always goes wrong and always goes bad, and I'm the bad guy. So you just stop taking risks. You stop stepping out and trying to do anything because it just becomes too scary, too risky, too much conflict. And you know how those arguments go. They're just like circular arguments where it just is nonsense and you can't tell what's up and down and there's no closure, or they stonewall you and just walk out and the conversation's over. And so you just start to like give in and give up. And so that's what this week's Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse podcast is about. If you'd like to hear how it happened to me, as well as Rosanna Faye of Roller Coaster of Love, please check that out. You can hear it wherever podcasts are played. It's called Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. But at that point, you just are trying to survive the relationship. You've given up trying to be your own person. A lot of us at this stage no longer even know what we like to eat. We often don't even know what we like to wear. We're certainly not having a whole lot of time with our friends or hobbies. Our whole focus is just trying to keep the house stable. We're trying to not rock the boat and trying not to end up with another exhausting argument. And here's the other thing I haven't mentioned up to now. Narcissists and other toxic people tend to move from crisis to crisis to crisis. They're always getting themselves into trouble because they break the rules. They don't anticipate consequences. They don't plan ahead. They tend to be very unrealistic. And of course, if you don't support them, then you're the bane of their existence and you don't believe in them. All sorts of stuff like that happens. And so as a result of that, you feel like you're bailing them out. You're like literally trying to keep you guys out of like financial ruin or them not losing a job, or you're just trying to like clean up some mess that they keep creating. So at these last stages, you're just about survival. You've really given up the idea of quality life and sense of meaning and finding happiness and satisfaction. You're just literally trying to survive. And at this point, moves you right into stage 6, which is you start to be a shadow of yourself. There's a profound loss of you. You're losing touch with your identity. You feel incredibly trapped. You end up wondering if you're the problem because they tell you you're the problem. You start to feel really frozen. I know at that point, that's like when I said I didn't even know if there was a point to life. Why was I around? I started to have thoughts of maybe be better off if I wasn't here. I wasn't actively like thinking of ways to harm myself, but I started just to feel like it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. And I started giving up. I felt like I couldn't go to anybody because people didn't seem to understand, or I was met with like shock or incredulity or shame, a lot of shaming of me. So I just started not talking to people. And I knew I couldn't talk to my partner because in his opinion, we didn't have a problem, or the problem was me. So I just started like shutting down. I started like just kind of shrinking and losing myself in that process. And then the final stage is called addiction and repetition. And this point is they kind of claim that and I don't know if I agree with this, but that you become addicted to the cycle of abuse and reward. I have to say, the problem with the reward is that it's a shrinking reward system. So in the beginning with the love bombing, which is so incredibly amazing, you end up, you're always like trying to pursue that, trying to get back to that. And yes, there's like revisiting of it. You do get these little, like if anybody heard my How I Met, Married, and Got Scammed by a Gold Digger series, which if you haven't, you can go to TikTok and look at the playlist series. You'll see that one of the things we kept doing is traveling. Well, most people are like, boy, you really had a rough life. You just went from trip to trip to trip. Well, what you don't understand is that I was trying to pursue that love bombing again. I was trying to pursue the best part of our relationship, which occurred on the trips. So if I could get him out of the house and get him away and get him just to myself, that maybe somehow we would like heal something. Sorry, I suddenly got the hiccups. We'd heal something. But really it was a shrinking return. That's the word I was looking, shrinking return, that every time we went through this abuse cycle, he would be surlier and crabbier and more irritated, that it really wasn't, I never had that initial return to the love bombing. You think that you're going to get it, but you never do. And I know how many of you that I've been in touch with who get stuck in this cycle, and you end up like they're so repentant and they say all the right words and they claim they're going to get help, and then you think maybe even they make some phone calls, but then the effort peters out. It just kind of disappears on you. And then you end up thinking, should I wait? Maybe I'm not being fair by giving them enough chance, or maybe my standards are too high. You start to kind of reappraise yourself, not realizing that it's all words, that what they do is just give you hope, false hope, and let you feed on the false hope while things remain the same. And here's the other problem. If you end up doing this I leave and come back thing with them, where you get away and then they woo you back, you think, oh, it's a fresh start. They've understood. They've had this big corrective change. They've realized that they've been awful to me. No, that's actually not what happens. That's what I thought happened. And so if you're like me, you do think, if somebody said to me, I want this relationship over, and I wasn't ready for it to be over, I really loved them, and they somehow deemed it reasonable for us to try again, I would think, oh my goodness, I got a second chance. Let's really work at this. I want to be a better person and make this really different. No, that's not how a narcissist thinks. Narcissist thinks, well, they survived it before. I've been really crappy before. They'll survive it again. They've now basically signed off on all my crappy crap. So they know now what they're getting. They know exactly. I'm not deceiving them. They know the Mr. Hyde part. So they shouldn't be surprised. That's why, for those of you who do this cycle, and most of us, by the way, takes an average of 7 times leaving, but I want to warn you that when you do the cycle of that letting them hoover you back, you're increasing your risk of violence. You're increasing your risk of it becoming physical. I realize now, and it's just been in the last few months, mine had a history of being abusive to his past wives. He hadn't laid hands on me yet, but he had at least 2 of them, 2 out of the 4. He was married 4 times before me. 2 of them, one he told me about. He actually told me what he did to her, serious stuff. And the other one, when I interviewed her, she said, did he hurt you? And then I said, no. And she said, then you're very lucky. So I know at least 2 of them he laid hands on a regular basis. I know now that I was moving towards that if you look at the escalation of violence and dangerousness, it was rapidly escalating. I'd seen him actually threaten somebody with a weapon before that, so he was certainly capable of this. So be warned that people like this, people who have an entitled sense of themselves, that they're above the law, that they're uniquely special, the rules don't apply to them, really believe the rules don't apply to them. They really believe that they're owed this honor and respect and this being right and having their way all the time. And if you press back and push back, if you resist, then you're seen as denying them what they think they deserve. And they don't see you as human. You're not a person to them. You're an accessory. They treat you like an accessory. You're disposable. So please be really, really aware of that this makes you super vulnerable, this hoovering process. So that's the whole stages, the 7 stages. Let me review them really quick. Stage 1 is love bombing. Stage 2 is trust and dependency. Stage 3 is criticism and devaluation. Stage 4 is gaslighting. Stage 5 is resignation and submission. Stage 6 is loss of self. Stage 7 is addiction and reputation. Addiction and repetitiveness. It's I can't say that word. I can see it and I can't say it. Repetition. There it is. I found it. By the way, if any of you are saying, hey, this resonates with me, I am so caught up in this, I am so lost, Lisa, Sunny, and I are launching a 12-week group coaching program called Trauma Bond Recovery Masterclass. It's going to be live weekly I think it's going to be on Wednesdays. We're going to meet on Wednesdays, and work through the stages of helping you break a trauma bond. So if you're interested, right now I don't have a sign up for it yet. We're working on that. We're getting close. But if you're interested, would you DM me or email me at hello@KerryMcAvoyPhD? I'd love to. Yeah, hello@KerryMcAvoyPhD.com. I would love to put you on a wait list to let you know when it's going to open up, but we're getting very close to being able to have a website so that you can actually sign up for it. But this is going to help people who are in a trauma bond, who know there's something wrong with a relationship, know they probably should leave, and don't know why they can't. Or it's for those who know they still have a trauma bond, they've left, they wish they could just get out of the, get that person out of their head. They can't stop like being preoccupied with that person. They just feel like they're so attached to them. This is for you. So if that describes you, then you're going to want to pay attention to the Trauma Bond Recovery Masterclass that starts in January. We're going to offer alternating times and start dates. So it's not just one time, it's going to be something ongoing. And here's the other option. If you also are out and you're trying to heal and you're struggling healing and you want personalized help with that, then check out Healing Strong. That's a 12-week group coaching that Lisa and I run on an ongoing basis, and our next sign up is for January. So think of that as a Christmas gift for yourself. All right, so why does this happen? How does this happen, and what should we do if you're stuck in a trauma bond? It happens because we as humans are innately wired for belonging. You're not meant to live alone. In fact, studies are coming out that being lonely and being isolated in a way that's uncomfortable and harmful to you is just as dangerous as having some addiction, that it's just as toxic to your health, and it has just as serious ramifications. We're built to be in community. We're built for relationships. And unfortunately, people who are really toxic understand that there's this vulnerability, and they're actually weaponizing your need for belonging against you. So I want you to hear that, because I'm going to say this in a different way. There are a lot of people out there who don't like vulnerability, that somehow seeing us having needs, innate needs like water and food and air, that relationships is essential to our well-being as water, food, and air. They somehow think that that's weak, being, kind of pitiful and being a little, needy, but it's not. This is the way you are built and wired. Unfortunately, we live in a world where real predators live, where there are actual sharks who feed off your attention, off of your love, your adoration, they feed off even maybe believe it or not, this is the sickest one, they feed off even trapping you, the fact that they can get you to get into the relationship with them. So recognize that there are people who are just not safe. I know that for me, this has been a big mental shift I've had to make. I was just traveling a couple weeks ago with my family, and I had to say to myself, don't necessarily meet somebody and tell somebody where you're from or what you're doing, because you don't know them. You don't know who they are or what they're about. You need to remember that there's a percentage of the world is just not safe. So unfortunately, we meet these human beings who are very sophisticated. This is the thing that we don't appreciate enough. They have been studying human nature their entire life. And they understand you better than you understand yourself. They understand what makes you tick and what makes you feel built up and seen. And they're using the very things that they know about you against you in order to get you into the relationship, to take advantage of whether it's your influence, your power, the way you make them feel, or sex, or money, or whatever it is, the fame that you might have. They know how to weaponize your needs for belonging against you. So I'm really tired of us blaming victims, that we have this mentality that we should somehow be above this, that getting in a relationship is the victim's fault. I don't know how many times I heard that I asked for it. No, I want you to know you did not ask for that. You did not ask to run into somebody who used your best parts against you. So that's how they do it. They use intermittent reinforcement. That, if anybody doesn't know, they've done a lot of studies, behavioral therapy studies, in which they looked at different kind of rates of reward. Like if I give you, they did it with animals. So if I give an animal a food pellet after every time it taps the lever, will it become really addicted to that behavior? And what they found is the most addictive way of creating addiction is to make it randomly occurring. It's called intermittent reinforcement. So here's this rat tapping at the lever, and it doesn't know if it am I going to get rewarded with the next tap, only one time, or whether it's going to get rewarded after the 50th tap. Because of this inconsistency, they end up being very, very addicted. And you know that. I mean, if you play Candy Crush or any of those games, they're using intermittent reinforcement. You might, they made it hard enough that you might succeed next time, but maybe they won't. Or if you've ever gone to Las Vegas and played the slot machines, you experience intermittent reinforcement. They're also using your hormonal changes, the emotional changes that you're undergoing as a way to really get you trapped. And they use our cravings for pleasure and excitement and feeling special. They're using all of this against you. Of course, I already mentioned that they're isolating you so that you can't get the advice and the opinion of the people that you trust in your world. You're kind of really in this world of two, which makes you extremely vulnerable to being unduly influenced. They're also kind of introducing conflicting beliefs. Be aware of that, where things don't quite match up. Here's the one that I got. I can't wait to see you're going to have the best weekend ever. And then he bows out of the weekend early to go to a football game, leaves me at the airport for hours. Now make that make sense. If somebody really can't wait and is all into you, then they would want to spend all that time with you and they wouldn't bow out. They would want this to last as long as it could. Watch for that kind of inconsistent behavior. That's telling you that something is wrong. That's not how normal people do things when they really feel all in on something. And of course they do all sorts of this promising and this future fake, we call it future faking, all of this, they create a world that you two are going to have together in the future. And you actually feel like you're starting to live it because you dream it. And that this shared world makes you feel like you know them and you've created this memories of something that hasn't even happened. So be very, very careful about all of that. So that's how it gets built, and that's how the 7 stages. So how do you then start to break it? What should you do if you think you're in a trauma bond? I'm going to give you the 3 things you should do if you think you're in a trauma bond. I want you to start documenting your feelings and thoughts, and I want you to start documenting the things that make you feel confused. So if something happens and you're not for sure what happened, it just feels wrong, I want you to actually keep a little notebook and do a they said, I said thing. This person said this, I said this, they did this, I said this. I'll tell you, writing Love You More forced me to do that, and I started to see through stuff. Just like the example I just gave you, bringing me for one of the first weekends and then bowing out early. Makes no sense. It's crazy. Left me feeling really confused and reeling and unsure my status of this relationship. By doing that, writing that down and saying, you know what, people who say I love you or are falling in love or are so crazy about somebody, they want to spend every second of every day with this person for forever in the beginning. There's something about this not lining up. So starting to document these things can go a real long ways of helping you break through this. I got a cough coming. So sorry. For those of you near the mic, I'm so sorry. So second thing you should do, in addition to documenting things with a journal or a note, is I want you to reach out to a trusted friend. I want you to find somebody that you know who can give you non-judgmental support. Somebody who you know is not going to make you feel ashamed and can really, really help you process this without pressuring you to make a decision. I know that's a tall order. I know there's not even some therapists can do that. I actually fired a therapist because they were pressuring me so hard to make a decision. But you need to find somebody that can kind of create this really safe space for you to admit honestly, hey, this is what's going on. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 is I want you to set one small boundary for yourself, something that you could manage that helps you in this relationship. Like, for example, maybe the boundary is the next time they stonewall you, you don't chase after them, you don't plead, you don't try to break it, you try to instead take the time for yourself. Maybe another one, and this is one I needed, instead of snooping and going through his phone to see if he's cheating, I need to say to myself, if I feel like it's happening, it probably is happening. I'm not going to do this and make myself feel really, really crappy. But find some small, or another maybe boundary is, you know what? I'm going to every week go out and have a cup of coffee with a friend. But find some way to introduce something in your life it's that you're adding in as you seeing you and reclaiming your own power. Okay, now I want to tell you 3 things not to do if you think you're trauma bonded. I want you to don't isolate yourself. This person wants you to keep secrets because it's in their best interest to keep the secrets. I also know that it's really hard to step out because there's so much backlash we get, so much embarrassing, shaming comments we get from our social support system. But find safe places where you know that the people around you are not going to do that to you. For example, you can join the Toxic Free community for $15 a month. And if you have a financial hardship, talk to me about it and I will make a deal. That's one thing that you can do. I also went out on Facebook and just typed in, some kind of like narcissistic abuse and found groups. I joined several groups and I tried them out. I tried to, see how healthy they were. Were there conversations did I feel safe in those environments? Were they helpful conversations or did it feel like it was just people, tattling on other people? So you don't want to just try once and then just give it up. I want you to actually go out and try and see what happens and see if this is the right group, a right situation for you. But don't isolate yourself. I also here's a hard one. I want you to stop rationalizing and minimizing their behavior. If what they're doing is hurting you, it's hurtful. If what they're doing is like lying and deceiving, they're a liar. They've been lying. I want you to not like, oh, well, but they had a bad day at work, or what happened, the stress they're under, or, I just wasn't really good with keeping up on the meals, or I want you to stop. I want you to stop doing all of that. I want you just instead realize that this is hard, that this is something really going wrong in this relationship, and that it's serious because it's seriously affecting you. You matter, and it's seriously affecting you. And the third thing I want you to stop doing if you think you're in a trauma bond is I want you to stop questioning and doubting yourself. I found out when I got done with this relationship and really, really took a close look at it, that a lot of what I thought was true was true. My gut said it was true. I found out it was true. Every single time. Even the ones that I thought like, where in the world did I get that idea? Because I'm normally not a paranoid person, I found out was real. I didn't make it up. I somehow, I don't know how, my senses were like spidey senses and I picked it up. So I want you to stop doubting yourself and thinking that you're paranoid or just thinking that you're too sensitive. You're not too sensitive. These relationships are very toxic, very deceptive. There's a lot of covert stuff going on. So if you feel like there's something wrong, chances are there really is something going wrong. If you think this person's cheating, they're probably cheating. You don't need proof that they're cheating. They're probably cheating. So unless you're a person who just normally is paranoid that way with everybody, I want you to start really trusting yourself. All right. I know we covered a lot of ground today about trauma bonds. I'm going to put my glasses on, so I'm going to start to see what you guys have been saying. So based on everything that I've said today, what kind of questions do you have for me about trauma bonds, breaking trauma bonds? What are they? Why are they? I would love to start to take your comments and your questions. So, and thank you for those who have been hanging out with me and going through this lecture with me. And I hope you join me every Tuesday. Already I've posted on Facebook and YouTube next week's topic, which is the 3 reasons why narcissists won't let you go. Like when you get to the end of yourself and you're like, I'm done. By the way, I'll be here on TikTok as well talking about why narcissists don't let you go. But so if you're like, I want out and they won't let me out, we're going to talk about all the ways and the strategies, why they do what they do and why they don't want you to leave until they want you to leave, until they're ready to discard you. So if you're ever curious about that, join me next week. So I'm glad, Amanda, that it's helpful. I'm glad that being here has been really great information. So what kind of questions do you have for me? Yeah, I agree with you, So Divine. So Diva, we do need to stop making excuses for their behavior. Yeah, Kerry, I love that name, by the way, Kerry. You're right. I had to leave in secret too. She said that's why I left in secret. I had to do some things that I felt were kind of like crappy and sneaky, because I'm not a sneaky person. I'm super transparent. I'm what you see is what you get. But I had to like start doing things that like making appointments with the attorney without him being aware of it. I don't like doing that. I know somebody recently told me they had to save for 10 years before they were ready to be able to leave. They financially could afford it. So we have to sometimes, you have to think of yourself, is this person putting my best interest at heart? Are they keeping my best interest in their mind? No, they're not. They're actively harming you. So if they're not watching out for you, which is what ideally a good partner should do, you need to be watching out for you. So please be aware of that. Hey, so Divina, I would love to be back on Dr. Les Carter's channel. He promises that I will be. He keeps telling me I'm one of his favorite people. I think that's so sweet. I find that so precious to me. I really appreciate that. All right, so somebody did come in with a question. Mine's currently behind bars. Is now the time to stop? Honestly, if you've got an opportunity to leave because they are behind bars, so you're really literally like, this is oh, thank you for that gift. This is really a great moment for you. Yeah, especially if somebody has a criminal record, that means there's like concerns for safety. So I would definitely see that as an opening, an opportunity to get some distance between you and that individual. Okay, so H says, I understand this is originally about romantic or intimate relationships regarding a trauma bond, but what could you do? Can you also discuss trauma bonds with parents and children? Yeah, absolutely. So I had a trauma bond with my mom and maybe even a little bit with my dad. Children don't know that they have a trauma bond. So it's not something they're going to recognize that, oh, this is a trauma bond. They just know I really need my mom or I really need my dad. I sometimes wonder if separation anxiety, which is what I had, how it manifested for me, it might be. I don't want to say as a clinical psychologist it's always true. So please don't hear me say that. But I do wonder sometimes separation anxiety is a manifestation for some children's trauma bonds, potentially. That's what I'm thinking. But I can't tell you, yes, research supports that. You're not gonna be able to help them break it, unfortunately, just because they don't know that and they depend on this person, really. So the best way that you can help as an outsider or maybe as a co-parent to this child, is to help them start to develop interests of their own and make suggestions about how the person they're afraid they're afraid they're going to lose or make angry or jeopardize their relationship or something bad happened to that person. Maybe you can like point out ways in which that's not happening. That you can show them like, see, they're okay. That you left for a weekend with your friends and they came back and everything's still okay. So those are ways that you can sort of like introduce awareness that bad things don't happen just because they're not with this person. And you can also like maybe point out to them that surviving failure with this adult, although really awful because toxic parents make children feel like it's catastrophic when they make a failure, but maybe you could point out when that child does have a failure that you don't see that as a collapse, as a total reason not to have a relationship, that's how people learn. And then use kind of other examples about how people have used failure. Like I'm thinking of Thomas Edison, who made 1,000 light bulbs before he finally found the light bulb that worked. In fact, it's recorded that a journalist asked him, how do you feel about failing 1,000 times? And he said, no, I just found 1,000 different ways that light bulbs don't work. Like use this example as a way to say, see, you can survive this. But it takes a process, and it may not be something that happens until this child grows up into adulthood and has more other relationships to see that this relationship's not healthy. But what a great question, and I really appreciate you asking that. I hope that some of those are a little bit helpful in giving you some context. So how do I deal with a narcissistic parent who always has had somebody who takes care of them and now wants me to? All right, so I have really super hard advice for you. The hard advice is don't volunteer. So what I have found when we have parents who expect, oh, bye, Teresa. Thank you so much for being here today with me. I appreciate that. What I have found when I have parents, like elderly parents who expect a lot out of their kids, the best thing to do is don't hear it as a demand or expectation. Instead, in your head, flip it and see it as a fear or an insecurity or a worry. So in other words, you shift the way you hear it. Like, I really wish it could be you. Why don't you come and visit me? I would do so much better if you were here and you stayed all the time. Hear that as a wish, like a longing, like I don't mean to be insulting, but when your kids, you're driving home and you pass the ice cream store, like, can't we stop? Can't we stop? I'd love you to view it that way. View it like, yeah, it would be nice if that would work, but it's not going to work. and then just go on with what's real. Like maybe they do need better care than you're able to provide. What you can say is, yeah, wouldn't that be great, mom or dad, if it worked out that way? But I just don't see that that's going to be feasible. This is going to be a whole lot workable this way. So in other words, because we're so used, we're conditioned because they're our parent to see when they say something to us, we see it as, oh my goodness, I have to comply. I have no choice but to show up that way. But you actually do. You're an adult too, and your life matters too. So shift it in your head and hear it a different way. How do I deal with, okay, I feel now like this is the part of the reason why I attract narcissists. Blissful MSR7, I would love to know what you're doing that you think is attracting them. I'm kind of curious about what your reaction is. How do I deal with constant disrespect? I'd be curious if you would tell me more what the disrespect looks like. Because I've found words like disrespect mean different things to different people. To some of us, disrespect is just disagreeing. So if I disagree with you, I'm showing disrespect. But maybe what you're talking about is somebody who's actually running down your comments and making you feel crap for having a different opinion. But so come back and let me know what an example of disrespect is, because and then I can help you be a little bit better about what to do about it. I'm right now moving some things around so I can see. Oh, I'm glad, Marion, that these are so helpful to you. I've been thinking of you. I sure loved getting to know you and meeting you. That was really awesome. Maria, so when my kids were 7 and 11, my mom had a stroke and I became her caregiver in our home. And it simply was a difficult time for all of us, especially for my 12-year-old. Yeah, those can be super, super challenging. That takes a lot out of us and costs us a lot. Certainly makes it very hard to set boundaries. Okay, Brittany asks, when you said to trust your gut, did you ever find out when you were sick that they try to fake care and then barely check in on you or help you? Did you experience that at all? Actually, yeah, I did. When my ex was sick, it was like a crisis. Seriously, it was like the whole world shut down because he was ill. And then when I was ill, here's the difference. When I was ill, he was hardly around, and I actually got hospitalized when I was in that relationship with him. And I remember him just having visits with me, just brief visits with me. I was alone a lot. Whereas when his mom was hospitalized for her knee surgery, he literally stayed in her room for days. Now, maybe he didn't. Maybe he told me he was and he wasn't. I don't know. There's that possibility too. But when he got sick, he ended up having kidney stones. I'll tell you, the world, like I said, stopped. But yeah, what it shows, Brittany, is that narcissists really struggle to have empathy. And the only world that's real to them is their world, not you. You're not, your needs, that your world isn't real, only their world. So their sicknesses are real, your sicknesses are inconvenience, or they see it as manipulation. It's a way for you to sort of try to take advantage of them, like you are, but they sort of off to see it that way. That's another interesting thing that Daniela said to me on today's interview, that by the way, for those of you I keep referring to it, we're going to be posting that December 12th on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. She said that she had found that medical crises, either your own or your immediate families, tend to be a way that some people break out of cults. That's a moment in time that there's this opening, that things can shift in dynamics and in relationships. And for those of you who know, that's exactly what happened in my case, that my son was diagnosed with leukemia. I had to rush back I was living in another country, rush back from that other country to be with him. And it was that occurrence that I knew things are going to change, that I now had an opportunity, that this was my window to getting out of this relationship. I knew that. So it did set me free. So I'd be curious to see if that's true for any of the rest of you. Did you find, what's broke your trauma bond? What helped you break free of this? Because really, essentially, we're talking about you breaking free from a cult of two. That's really what this is. You're in a cult of two when you're in a relationship like this. So what helped you break free? Was it your medical crisis? Or maybe did a family member get sick? I'd be really super curious about that. Yeah, Astrid said, there's nothing more upsetting to a narcissist than having a partner who's sick. You know what my ex said to me? He actually discarded me, and this is how he discarded me. He said to me, being around your sick son with leukemia is too painful for me. And he left. And I was and there was more going on at that moment, but I was so enraged that he said that, the audacity of him saying that. And remember, I'm widowed. My late husband died of cancer. I spent 5.5 terrible months watching my strong, healthy husband of 31 years succumb to cancer in 5.5 months. It was brutal. It was grueling. I heard from the hospice care people that they saw me becoming extremely sick. They were about to pull him out and give me respite because they saw me going down because I had spent 5.5 months trying to hold everything up and take care of him as he was losing his body and his mind. And it was horrific. So to have my ex tell me that my son being sick with leukemia was too painful for him, I had no use for him. I had no, literally, I'd like, there's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. Seriously, bye. I'm just so out of here. I'm so done with you. So yeah, it did work for me. So yeah, Mel D said, yeah, her issues or his issues, I don't know your gender by the way, because it's an anonymous name, but that helped you get out. That's fascinating that helped you get out. I'm really interesting. They can't, I agree with you, So Divine. They can't deal with real life. And you having any kind of inconvenience, any kind of way that it affects them, that's too realistic for them. They just can't do it. Oh, and Astrid said her breast cancer broke her free. That's fascinating. I had not heard that until Daniela said that. That was really fascinating. Yeah, Blissful, I am seeing some of your messages, not all of them, but I am looking your direction periodically. What message, Blissful, would you like me to see that I have not seen? I'm super curious about that. So Pillar of Light said, my ex, Renee wants to know how my son's doing now. Oh, I have not posted it. I hadn't got my kids' permission, but I went on a trip to Europe with them. And we spent 10 days in Austria and Switzerland. It was my oldest. He's now 32. Yes. No, he's 33. My oldest is now 33. It's been 5 years. We can say now he's cured of leukemia. He had acute myeloid leukemia, which there was, until prior, there was a 50% possibility of mortality. And no, he's completely recovered and he's cured. And we already have on the books our next trip to Europe. We're going to go in May, and I'm super, super excited about that. So we had a great time. I made 2 videos. Of course, I have to find royalty-free music because because my account on TikTok is commercial now, so I can't use normal. But I created 2 cute clips using CapCut templates that I should post because you can get a view of what we did. It was a lot of fun. It was really a great time. Yeah, Astrid, I'm thrilled to hear you're 9 months free. That's awesome. Really, really awesome. So yeah, Pillar of Light said, my ex asked how I was going to ruin his Christmas and that I have ruined every Christmas. Let me reread it. He asked me how I'm going to ruin his Christmas and every Christmas because she had to bury her mom 2 days before Christmas Day. Isn't that like, jeez. Yep, that's so typical. That's really typical. Okay, Blissful, you said, this is my 4th narcissistic relationship and I'm through and I was healed and now I'm back in one. And I bet you're wondering what is happening and what's going wrong. By the way, Blissful, I know right now, because I can see at the top, that one of my favorite people, the echo chamber, Lynn, is on this live at this moment. And I need you, Blissful, to go over and follow Lynn. It's called Echo Chamber. Maybe, Lynn, you can say, hey, I'm here. Yes, it's me. Because, Blissful, I have a suspicion that you might be struggling a lot with egoism. And if you want to learn what even is that, because it's really the true opposite of narcissism, there she is. So Blissful, please follow the echo chamber. I think some of us, I'm included, have a lot of egoistic tendencies in which we learn to submerge ourselves and we've built our identity on the identity of somebody else. And so we get attracted to really strong personalities because we can submerge ourselves in them and around them and find ourselves in them. And it's just really a weird thing, but it's hard to explain unless it's happened to you or you're experiencing it. So I would really check that out. I think that's a problem for a lot of us. A lot of us, unfortunately, have come from homes and backgrounds and where there's been narcissistic abuse there, and we have been coercively controlled there. It's gotten familiar, and unfortunately, that familiarity makes it very easy to get pulled into a new type of relationship like that. I plan to have Lynn back on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. So you guys on YouTube, you're going to see her back because I just really love her content. And I think it's something we need to be talking about. Up till recently, it was quiet. Nobody talked about egoism, which is really the true opposite of narcissism, that this is actually another form of personality that gets developed. And I'm so thrilled that finally somebody is coming forward and saying something about it. I've written about it a little bit, mentioned it here and there, but I've not really made it a big piece of my channel. But if you'd like to learn more, she's also on YouTube. So please follow her there. She's getting that channel up and going. So it'll be really great to have another content creator who is a clinician. She is a therapist, so who's talking about this stuff. Hey, you guys, this is 5 o'clock. This is the time that I always hop over and go to my club. For those of you who don't know, I have a club with, we have live group meetings, and we meet on Tuesdays as well as Saturdays. If you're looking for a support system where people can love on you and come around you, give you support 24/7 with chat, all of that, please check out the Toxic Free Relationship Club. There's multiple levels, and anybody who needs financial support, I always offer it. The bar is not too low when it comes to financial support. So please don't let that be a hang up, because I really believe powerfully in the power of community. Yeah, Lynn, I'm so glad. Thank you for being here, and I'm glad we could introduce those who don't know you that can reach out and find you. All right, you guys, this has been really amazing. Thank you so much for the great conversation we've had today. Come back next week. We're going to talk about, we're still on the same topic, but we're going to talk about the reverse side, about why narcissists don't let us out of the relationship, why they keep us trapped. All right, you guys, and thank you so much for the gifts. I saw a lot of gifts come in today. I really appreciate it. All right, you take care. I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.